I will go ahead and say hello and welcome to folks who are here. We are glad to have you here. This is the October meeting of the Carolina Community Coalition, and we are super excited about the conversation that we're having today. I would like to ask folks to go ahead and use the chat to introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what department or organization that you are a part of, because we'd love to have some good conversation in the chat and see who all is here. And then if you have questions for our speaker or our panelists as we go, we do have the Q&A function somewhere in the bottom menu there. And you can submit a question if you would like to submit anonymously, I believe you can, or at the end, we'll have some opportunity for questions and conversation, and you can also raise your hand to ask questions that way. But yeah, super excited to have everybody here and to have a conversation about this really important topic. So thank you to those of you who are introducing yourself in the chat. Thank you for making sure that chat is to everyone so that everybody can see who all is here. That might be all of the housekeeping and logistics that we need to talk about today. We'll see. So my name is Amy Harrigan. I'm the Director of Substance Abuse Prevention and Education. And let's get started. So let me see. I'm going to read Dr. Swan's official bio, make this so that you all can be as impressed with her as I am. So Dr. Swan is a professor in the departments of Women and Gender Studies and Psychology. She received her PhD in Social and Personality Psychology with a minor in Women's Studies from the University of Illinois. Dr. Swan's program of research follows the tradition of Kurt Lewin's dictum that there is nothing so practical as a good theory. Her research focuses on health disparities, particularly as related to the COVID-19 pandemic and gender-based violence, especially intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and drugging. The ultimate goal of Dr. Swan's research is to create knowledge that will illuminate solutions for the problems of health disparities and gender-based violence and the suffering they cause. Dr. Swan teaches courses in graduate and undergraduate social psychology and women's health. And we are so glad to welcome Dr. Swan back to the Carolina Community Coalition and excited to hear some of the things that research she has to share with us. So thank you, Dr. Swan, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back. I think I presented with this group, but it's been at least 5 years, if not more, definitely long before COVID. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'll go ahead and share my slides. Give me just a minute to get it set up in presenter view. Okay. Does that look like presenter view?
Yep,
Great.
there it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks to Amy for asking me to talk today about my research on drugging, and sometimes I just put in the title also drink spiking, because sometimes when you say drugging, people aren't quite sure what you mean. And I wanted to talk a little bit about at least what's known about prevalence and effects, motives, and then I'd like to really talk about some ideas for prevention that I think we can take from some of the data that I'm going to share today. And I have about 30 minutes, is that right? Okay, so maybe if someone could maybe give me like a 3-minute warning, just in case I kind of lose track of time.
Definitely, we can do that.
Yeah, okay. So for the purposes of the research that I do, we define drugging as administering a drug or alcohol to someone without their knowledge or consent. And what I find again and again is that students know it's happening. I bet all of you know it's happening because you all work with students. And anytime you talk to any student probably on any college campus, there's an immediate recognition. They're like, oh, sure, yeah, this is happening. This is a thing. But there's very little research on this, and it really surprises me. I've been doing research in it for over 10 years now, and there's still just hardly anybody looking at this in a research-based way, which is really surprising to me. So when I tell you about prevalence of drugging, I need to preface it by saying we don't really have great data on this because unlike sexual assault or domestic violence or other forms of gender-based violence, where we have national data from the CDC, we don't really have that for drugging. We have some national data on the more specific topic of drug-facilitated sexual assault. And so some of these sexual assault surveys will include that as an item in the surveys. But as far as just drugging, did someone put a drug in your drink, et cetera, there's no national surveys really. So I've done a couple of studies that are larger studies, and I think those are probably our best estimates. So one of the studies that was published a few years ago, we looked at over 6,000 students at 3 college campuses, one of them being USC, and a couple of others. And there we just had a single item. We asked our respondents, did someone put a drug into your drink when you were unaware? Did you suspect or know that that happened? So it was just specific to a drug into their drink, and 1 in 13 students said yes to that question. And then when we sort of counted up the number of incidents over the past academic year at those 3 campuses, it was about 539 for our survey respondents. A more recent study that we did was with over 4,000 young adults age 18 to 30, and this was using an online sample of young adults who were U.S. residents. So this was not specific to college students, although most of the respondents either were currently in college or had been college students at one time. And here we used a more expansive way of asking about drugging. We asked if they had ever experienced it, and we asked it in a few different ways. Because we were asking it in a more expanded way, we got a higher response rate. So almost 1 in 5 of people who did that survey said that they had been drugged. And I'll show you kind of the different items that we used. So 9% of people said someone had put alcohol in their non-alcoholic drink. That was the most common. 8% said someone put a drug into their food or beverage. 8% said that someone put a different drug in a joint or vape or blunt that they then smoked, and they didn't know that the other drug was in there. 6% experience what I kind of call drug swapping. Someone says you're getting one kind of drug, but really a different drug was given to you. And 7% said someone gave them a drug or alcohol so that it would be easier to have sex with them. So those were the percentages of drugging victimization. And then when you kind of put all the data together, about 19% said that at least one of those things had happened to them. We also asked if people had drugged others. So we wanted to look at the perpetration side of that as well. So 3% of those respondents indicated that they had drugged someone. And then for those same types of drugging, 2% said they put alcohol in someone's non-alcoholic drink. 1% said they put a drug in someone's food or beverage. 1% put a different drug in a joint, blunt, or vape that someone smoked. 1% drug swapped on someone. And 1% said they gave someone a drug or alcohol so it would be easier to have sex with them. So the percentages are small, but that's 40-something people out of 4,000 who are saying that they're doing this. Then in terms of drugs used, this is a list of all kinds of drugs from the people who had said that they had drugged others. And a lot of those people said they didn't know actually what the drug was. But of those they did, you can see the list here. And number one on the list is alcohol, probably not surprising to anyone in this meeting. And then just a wide range of all kinds of other drugs. Yeah, and the drugging messaging, I think that was prevalent in like the 90s and 2000s. People talked a lot about roofies or rohypnol, GHB, and ketamine, but we weren't really seeing much of that. Mostly it was just a variety of other drugs that people were using. Um, Outcomes of being drugged differ by gender. So we do see a lot of gendered kind of interpretations of drugging. So going back to the study with the college students that we did with the 6,000 college students, we asked them if they had blacked out, become ill, were sexually assaulted, had been beat up, or conversely, if they had enjoyed the experience of being drugged. And so the red bar here are female respondents, the blue bar are male respondents. So what you see is that females tend to be having a much more negative experience of getting drugged. They're more likely to black out. They're more likely to get sick. They're more likely to be sexually assaulted. Males are more likely to get beat up. So that was the reverse of that effect there. And then I think maybe one of the most kind of interesting or maybe unexpected is that last data point there about people saying that they enjoyed being drugged. And we found that over a third of the male respondents said they enjoyed it, said it was, fun for them. And even some of the female respondents, much smaller percentage. But so for some people, drugging is seen as more of kind of a fun thing or like, a party type of behavior. And by the way, I can't really see anyone at all. So if someone wants to stop me or, have a question or something, please just say something. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep going here.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Um, we were interested in risk behaviors, so we looked at this in a study with the 4,000 young adults in the United States, and particularly looking at if people are using substances, does that raise their risk for getting drugged? And it probably will not surprise you that it does. So what you see here are percentages. And so for the red bars, you see like 24% of people who said that they binge drank in the last year had been drugged, compared to 13% of those who did not binge drink. So it almost doubles their odds of getting drugged if they had binge drank. You can see that people who used marijuana in the last year also were more likely to be drugged, and people who had used some kind of illicit drug that wasn't marijuana, so something besides marijuana. Over a third of them had been drugged. So I think that tells us that when there are like sort of drug use in people's environment, and maybe that's something that they do in their friend groups, maybe that's kind of a social norm in their friend groups, that increases the likelihood that someone might get drugged. So maybe drugs are kind of seen as normative, a way of having fun, not a threatening thing. So that may make people more likely to think, oh, I can drug someone and it won't be that bad, or it might be fun or something like that. So what I want to do next is turn to a study that we did where we really wanted to understand, why do people drug other people? And so we interviewed people for this particular study. We interviewed both people who had been drugged and people who had drugged others. So we did the interviews here on this campus and also at the University of Cincinnati. We put a poster that looked pretty much like this around our campuses. And we just asked people who had had some experience with drugging, some personal experience with drugging to contact us, and they would be paid for an interview. And we ended up getting, I think, over 200 contacts with people interested in being interviewed, and we ended up interviewing 49 people who had either been drugged or who had drugged someone else. So there's kind of an overview of the 49, and you can see the gender breakdown there. And what I wanted to focus on in this slide was the people who had drugged others and were also victims. So there were 11 of those people. So the key point here, I think, is that people who drug others almost always are also drugged themselves. Maybe they've been drugged in the past. And I think what happens is that people maybe they kind of think the behavior is normative, that, it happened in my friend group, my friend drugged me, and now I'll do the same thing to someone else. So only one person who drugged other people had not been drugged himself. And I thought that was pretty striking how um, being a victim and being a perpetrator really went together there. And we do see that with other types of victimization too. So I wanted to talk about now from the people we interviewed, their different views on drugging and how that might give us some ideas about messages for prevention and how to target these messages. So some people that we interviewed said drugging is clearly bad. It's, harmful. It's risky. I didn't like that it happened. I thought it was really dangerous. And these are not people who are going to go drug others. But other people we interviewed said it was fun. I kind of enjoyed it, or my friend did it to me and I thought it was funny. And some of them did go on to drug others. So when we think about how we might want to target prevention messages, I think understanding that group of people is pretty important. So I'm going to put a few quotes up, and I think it's just easiest to give you a minute to read the quote. So this is an example of somebody who was drugged. They didn't want it. They didn't expect it. They were not happy about it. They did not think it was cool. So I'll just give a minute to read. So this is probably the way a lot of people see drugging. I think most students probably don't really think it's acceptable, like this person. And this person's saying, where I'm from, no one really does this. So it's not normative in their world. But they go to a party where it does seem to be the social norm. So this friend, apparently it doesn't occur to her that she might want to tell her friends that there's Xanax in the jungle juice. So to her, maybe it seems kind of normal. Maybe this happens at a lot of parties she goes to. So this, I think, is an example of where people see it as normative. It's fun, it's having a good time. We're not trying to harm anyone, it's livening up the party. And so I think this is the norm, or kind of the population that would be important to think about in terms of trying to prevent drugging, and trying to think of what kind of prevention messages might uh, these people might be receptive to. And I really feel like it's time to move beyond victim-focused messages, watch your drink and that sort of thing. We've been doing that since like the 90s, the 2000s, And most people probably know, have some sense that they need to be watching their drink and all of that. And I feel like that, while that's an important message and we probably need to keep saying it, I think we need to go beyond that and think more about the people doing the drugging and how to target them and what sort of messages might be effective to make them think twice about that behavior. So this is an example that I'll let you read of someone who drugs his friends and doesn't intend harm, doesn't see it as really a harmful thing. So this young guy doesn't seem to see it as harmful. It's his first party. He's, not got a lot of experience with college parties yet, and he thinks it would make he and his friends have a good time. Doesn't seem to have occurred to him to, maybe just tell his friends, "Hey, I put some Xanax in here." Um, so this might be somebody that maybe could be targeted with a prevention message. So maybe some prevention messages about bodily integrity would be helpful for somebody like this. Like, you don't really have a right to put things in other people's bodies that they don't want. Consent, I feel like a message about consent might be helpful. It's not okay to do something sexual to somebody that doesn't want that or without asking for their consent. It's also not okay to put a drug in someone's body without informing them, without their consent. You could accidentally hurt people. This guy probably didn't want to hurt his friends. Um, but maybe if he thought about, hey, you don't know, maybe your friend is taking some medication that could interact negatively with this, maybe just communicate with your friend. So the importance of communication about these issues. And maybe somebody like this would be receptive to those kinds of messages. Here's another quote from somebody who was drugged and his friend drugged him and he didn't see it as harmful. So this person got drugged himself, and then he went on to drug other people. So you see that later in the interview. Um, and he feels that because it's his friends, then it's okay. He says, if it would have done anything worse, I would have been mad for sure, but he's willing to excuse it because it was his friends. So this is somebody who's kind of learned the social norm that, oh, well, maybe this is okay. My friend did it to me and nothing bad happened, so maybe it's okay. So I think this kind of takes us back to that relationship between victimization and perpetration, that the people who are drugging others tend to have been drugged and they have decided that that behavior is okay and normative. So they don't see it as harmful in this case. So then he may decide to drug one of his friends later on. And the social norm that drugging is okay or not harmful may kind of spread from friend to friend in that way.
Dr. Swan, we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh,
And I think
okay.
one might be helpful here. In this motivation, are they only drugging people without without the other person knowing that are these reports only from unknown drugging? There, I'll read Megan's question exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, when we were interviewing people, we asked them, we were really trying to get at, did you put a drug in someone's drink when they didn't know? Or did you, drug someone when they didn't know, because we were trying to separate it from like um, from the situation where a person would know.
Mhm. So in these situations, it sounds like both of the quotes are, they kind of told the people pretty quickly, hey, I put something in there, or that
Um,
feeling's really strong, and the person said, yeah, I put this thing in there.
oh yeah, in the with the first case with the Xanax and the jungle juice.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know if that particular friend put the Xanax in the jungle juice or if it was somebody else at the party and she said, "Oh, that's what they do here at this party. They put
Mhm.
Xanax in the jungle juice." Yeah. And then was there another question?
Um, there are a couple we can go back to later.
Okay.
Um, yeah, Julia asked, was there any discussions about how people felt after they drugged someone? So do they feelings or
Mhm.
attitudes such as regret or pride? Like, how did they feel about it after the fact?
Yeah, there was some of that. Let me get to
And I don't want to interrupt your presentation too much. So, you know.
um my screen is kind of frozen up here. Okay. Um let me skip a little bit actually. Okay, so here's somebody who felt regret about drugging and kind of accidentally drugged someone. Yeah, so this person clearly feels a lot of regret. And, maybe some kind of prevention message to her prior to this event, because she doesn't seem like she wants to harm people or even really wants to drug people, just to say, hey, be careful. Make sure everybody knows what's going on. Like if somebody asks you for a drink and you're going to make it with Molly water, like make sure people know. So maybe a message as simple as that could have helped prevent this particular situation from happening. Um, okay, let me go back a little bit to another example that was pretty interesting. Um, This was another example of someone who was victimized by drugging and then went on to perpetrate it. So I'll let you read the quote here. So this quote, I think, illustrates several things. One is that there seems to be a masculinity element going on here. So the part I highlighted in red sort of illustrates, if you're if you're not going to try the cocaine, then, you know, that makes me question your masculinity. Um, are you really a real man? So they use that degrading, term for female anatomy. I didn't put the whole term on there, but you can probably guess what it is. Um, you would have been too much of that if you wouldn't try the cocaine. So I feel like there's like masculinity and social identity kinds of concerns all tied up here. And then on the next slide, he talks a little bit more about it, and the interviewer asks him, would you have preferred to have been told that it was cocaine? So I'll let you read that next slide. So he was excusing his friend. You know, he was saying they were joking around with me. It was more like a brother thing. Um, I'm not mad. My friends would never give me enough to actually hurt me. So he's really trying hard to normalize and just feel like this is okay, that what happened to him is okay. And in that particular case, later in the interview, he did actually go on to develop a cocaine addiction from this being drugged, and it was pretty serious for a time. Um, but he never blamed his friend for that. He blamed himself. He said, I just shouldn't have let it get out of control. You know, eventually I managed to get it back under control. I don't think he even told anybody. He didn't tell his friends or anybody. It was so important to him to, I guess, be a part of that friend group and, you know, sort of adopt the social norm that the friend group had, that he, you know, suffered this pretty devastating consequence, but didn't want to blame his friends. So there, I think you can kind of see that victimization perpetration interface. And then he does go on to enact the same behavior. So later on, he drugs one of his friends in the same way, where they think they're going to snort crushed up Adderall and it's actually cocaine. So you can kind of see that cycle continue where one person gets drugged, they do it to another, they do it to another and another, and it kind of gets passed on that way. Um, I'm about out of time, so maybe I'll go ahead and end here. But I do want to say that most of the people that we interviewed who had drugged others were people who were drugging their friends, their male friends. So like male on male drugging between friends. Um, there are certainly people who are drugging others, like drugging women for sexual assault purposes. We did interview one person who admitted to doing that, and um, I could share his interview at another time, but he was really different than everybody else in the sample. And I don't know that a prevention message would have been too effective for that particular person. But for a lot of the participants who seem to just kind of think that drugging is fun and not really harmful, and they're not trying to harm someone, I think a prevention message maybe could get those people to think twice about what they're doing. So, as conclusions, I think drugging probably decreased during COVID, but it appears to be back. I'm hearing stories. Sounds like you all are hearing stories too. It appears to be back with us, unfortunately. Um, Prevention messages should target potential druggers, I feel, not just victims. And I think that understanding the motives of people who drug others can help. And then that can help us think about what sorts of messages might work and might convince them just to, you know, communicate or think about bodily integrity or consent before they drug someone else. So that's it for me. I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Thank you for that. It's really sobering to hear and see some of these messages, but I think important for us to keep talking about. There is one question early that Megan added that I want us to ask you before we move on to our other folks for the panel and conversation, which is the question about outcomes. And so were participants able to choose more than one response? So we're curious, how many of those people experienced multiple outcomes, especially if they enjoyed it and, you know, one of the other more negative outcomes?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. They did. They were able to choose more than one. And I remember looking at that at one point, like how many people who said they enjoyed it did experience some of these other negative outcomes. And there was some overlap there. Um, some people who blacked out still said they enjoyed it.
Mhm.
I don't think there were too many who said they, you know, got sick or experienced sexual assault. But yeah, for some people, blacking out maybe is not necessarily a bad thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, if folks have other questions about Dr. Swan's research, feel free to throw them in the chat or to use the Q&A. But we also want to share some resources from our Title IX office and from Sape. And so I see Ashley has her camera on. Ashley is our Associate Director over the Office of Sexual Assault. And I'm going to mess up the name, Sexual Assault and Violence Prevention and Response. Nope, I'm still messing it up. Ashley, please fix me.
So SAVIP stands for Sexual Assault, Violence, Intervention, and Prevention.
There we go. See. Welcome, Ashley. Tell us about your office and your resources, and tell us what we can do if we're a friend of someone who has potentially been drugged, and what we can kind of do in the moment with those folks.
Absolutely. So our office here is specifically focused around interpersonal violence. So some of the research talked about earlier, looking at potential use of drugging for potential sexual assault or some level of violence. If you are with someone or know someone that's experienced that, here at USC, we serve all of our students and then are able to consult for faculty and staff, but making sure that letting them know that you believe them and that you support them. I want to make sure they get the best care possible. And our office can help work with different community and campus providers to get them some support. Sometimes that looks like, depending post-assault, going to a hospital and receiving a forensic medical exam or some sort of testing related to the drugging. We do talk with a lot of our students that come in around this about there may be, that's not foolproof, or especially within a time frame of going, you may not get a result that may show something there, something not. But regardless, we still believe you into what happened and making sure that we are getting you the best care. We also would recommend some of our local partners as well, like Pathways to Healing for sexual violence, Sister Care for relationship or domestic violence, and then the Hive Community Circle, who serves both relationship violence and sexual violence, specifically for marginalized communities. But folks can give our 24/7 hotline a call, talk to a confidential advocate about what they've experienced, and we can work with them to get them whatever support is going to be most helpful for them both on and off campus.
Thank you, Ashley. And if folks have questions for anybody, you can throw them in the chat. You can use our Q&A function, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. I think Brian is here from our Office of Title IX and Civil Rights. And so, Brian, I will let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your office.
Hi, my name is Brian Sape. I am one of the coordinators for incident response and support here in the Office of Civil Rights and Title IX. Thank you for dropping that for me. I work on the response team. So what we do is reach out. So when those reports initially come in, they don't immediately go into a investigation. We reach out and we allow the complainant to kind of sort of drive that process and what they want to see. But my team that I work on, we reach out and we provide supportive measures for any type of absences that the student may occur, if they need some extension to deadlines for any type of assignments coming up. If this happened last year and they were affected while they were in the class, we're able to go back and withdraw them from that class. So we help with the withdrawal process. We have students that go down to part-time. We'll work with the registrar's office to make sure that they stay in full-time status if they have to go below that. So we can kind of sort of navigate those things as well. No contact directives. We have helped them with resources and referrals to the Health and Wellness Center, to Sape. We just kind of sort of help them through that process of whatever they're seeking. There was some information that I was told by the AVP to share on this call. So to date, we have had 17 cases since June that was related to sexual exploitation. 6 of those involved conduct outside of the scope of sexual exploitation, vulnerism, flashing, etc. And the 11 remaining cases involve fraternity pledging processes, allegedly to involve sexual exploitation. In instance that these allegations were excerpts from a fraternity that was involved. So a lot of these cases that have come in has involved pledging processes that is going on. We have received cases, and we have worked with those complainants that have submitted reports. Reports can be submitted 24/7. We're open in our office from 8:30 to 5. So we are a team of 4 for response. So we try to reach out within 24 hours of receiving those cases, Monday through Friday.
Thank you for that, Brian. And that was going to be one of my first questions. Is Dr. Swan mentioned perhaps drink spiking is back up after kind of a delay in COVID. And it sounds like you're hearing that and seeing that in reporting to Title IX. Obviously, that happens without necessarily getting reported, but you guys are seeing an increase. Ashley, are you also seeing that kind of increase over in the Sape office?
We certainly are. We're seeing quite the spike that we've seen that we did not see in the last few years. A lot of them have been similar things that Brian was just talking about around different processes, pledging process, fraternity and sorority life. And some have been kind of in just the local general community, specifically around kind of that after game day culture. But we've received a lot of disclosures around that over the last 3 months.
So what is and this is to both of you and all 3 of you, any of you, what is the advice for, I'm concerned about my friend, I think maybe they've been drugged, or whether in the moment or the next day, what is the process?
Yeah, so anytime that whether it's today or next week, we support reporting it, because if it's reported, if it's not reported, we don't know. But we say report it, whether it's something where you're doing it anonymously, and you have that information, the complainant's information, you don't have to know who the respondent is. We just want to make sure that those resources get to them, and we provide that support as an institution to make sure that we're restoring education. And also for faculty and staff, we work with them in our office as well, so helping restore them to work. So again, just making sure that it's reported. Again, Save It will tell their process, but if it's something where they want a confidential space, we definitely provide to our reporters, Save It, to kind of sort of give that resource to them as well.
So I think similarly, we are supportive of whatever process someone wants to go through. Whether it's reporting right away or talking to a confidential space first to know what a report looks like. We've seen a lot of students just have general questions of, if I submit a report, what does that mean? And then us being able to walk them through that process and saying it doesn't necessarily mean it goes to an investigation right away. It's at least documenting somewhere. But I think for people who are that support person for someone else, that first step is really making sure that that person knows that you care about them and that you believe them. Because a lot of times when someone discloses something like that, if they are not met with that empathy and care in the beginning, it can be really difficult for that person to ever talk about it again. And so it might mean that they're not ready to move forward with something yet, but they know that you care about them and that you're with them every step of the way. And I think too, just being able to have those conversations within your social groups, and for a lot of our students, kind of similar to some of the conversations happening in the chat around consent and education, making sure that people are talking and sharing information with each other. I think we've seen a lot recently where people are having similar experiences, but no one's talking about it. And so how do we know that it's happening? Being able to find other people or have people of support with you in your circle.
And I will also add to that, a lot of the complainants that we're speaking with have made mention out loud that it has happened to someone in their friend circle. So we're able to immediately identify who they are through our system and reach out and provide those supportive measures. And again, making sure that we show that compassion when they come to us. So we're not asking for, oh, did you go to the hospital? Where's your paperwork? Those are not things that we're asking when they come to our office. It's, are you okay? Is there anything that we can do to restore education and make sure that you're safe? Another thing that I didn't talk about was working with housing to relocate our complainants when they are maybe in the same residence hall as the respondent. So we also work with them to make sure that they're moved, and that's normally done within like a matter of hours. Even on the weekends, our Res Life team is very responsive with those that are on duty, that also make sure that they're moved in the interim of us getting the report and kind of sort of sorting things out the next morning.
It sounds like a lot of the reports that we've gotten, officially this fall, have been more of those folks who were sort of more maliciously targeted, for some type of act of violence against them. But we've also got these reports about, maybe it's connected to some hazing behavior, and that maybe even the folks who are doing the drugging are, being the victims of a form of violence. So it's an interesting connection between, these, that idea, Dr. Swan, that someone who's being a victim is then turns around and is a perpetrator, or someone who feels forced into that situation. So it's interesting that your research was so much focused on, found so many people who found it funny, and it's just a funny thing to do to friends. But the flip side of that is folks who really are the, unknowing or unwilling, maybe victims in this. So I think some of the questions in the conversation in the chat is about, like, what does the prevention look like? What thoughts do we have about, like, how do we prevent people from perpetrating, particularly if they have maybe more malicious intents?
Yeah, for the Office of Civil Rights and Title IX, our initiatives that we have taken on campus, we've attended the Panhandlets one night that they had their e-board meeting where we were able to help educate. Our AVP has gone to fraternities meetings that are held on Sunday night. So we're, coming in after hours to kind of sort of provide that support, as well as just making sure we have an educational specialist who also goes around on campus and with our student organizations that are inviting her in to also educate the communities that they're in and their organizations just from our end.
Dr.
Yeah.
Swan?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of like the question, it's probably not that hard with the sort of, oh, it's just a joke, kids, like the one who put the Xanax in his friend's drinks, like he's probably relatively easy to reach.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who maybe have some antisocial characteristics, so we did interview one person like that I mentioned. And, let's be honest, most of those people probably aren't going to be willing to be interviewed by us, but that one guy was, and he was just generally antisocial. He, beat people up. He drugged women with alcohol to have sex with them, and he told us that. He defaced somebody's car because they made him mad. Like, this guy just had a pattern of pretty antisocial behavior. And I don't know what kind of prevention message would really work for him, but it makes me think about the bystander literature.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's something that we've done a lot with on our campus. Like, maybe not everybody in the fraternity is 100% comfortable with this
Right.
behavior. So how do we empower the people who kind of have the good social norms to not just sort of go along with it, So maybe somebody coming into the fraternity meeting or something and, saying, hey, this isn't normative, we don't do this on this campus. Maybe that's helpful in kind of addressing, because, there's going to be a few antisocial folks probably on any campus doing these things. And unless they've got peers holding them accountable, and looking out for each other, Um,
Yeah.
so those are my thoughts on that.
It's really it's an injunctive norm message, right? This is how many people approve of or disapprove of this
Mhm.
behavior. Which often, when you are aware that most people in the group disapprove, that then helps you feel more motivated to take action when you see the behavior. And so maybe that's one of the avenues to have to get folks to intervene in those moments, or to say, hey, this isn't cool with us. And I know that is a big part of the conversation that we had with the IFC men last week, was about what are you allowing to happen in your chapter. And you are representing your entire group, and so the individuals in the group reflect on you. And so how can you respond to that as a group and as a chapter? And it's a real challenge. Ashley, will you talk a little bit about what you guys do with kind of bystander intervention training and what
Absolutely.
those look like?
Yeah, so here at USC, we use we call it Gamecock Stand Up. That is our bystander intervention messaging and programming. And so what we really do is start with the basics of what does it look like when a situation is unhealthy. So we give some examples and help people kind of learn, what does it mean when there's an unhealthy or unsafe situation that you have noticed. Then we talk about with folks, what are your individual characteristics that help you either intervene on someone's behalf or prevent you from doing it, and what do those things mean to you. And then we utilize the 3Ds of bystander intervention here, but we talk about being direct, so directly intervening in that moment, whether it's to the person being harmed or potentially the person doing that harm. For others, it might be delegating to someone else. We talked a lot about this with IFC, of your new members are brand new, they're just learning, they don't know a lot of things yet, they're kind of all trying to take it all in and learn. They might not be the person to directly go and intervene, but they may delegate it to someone in leadership or someone on a risk committee or somebody who's a sober monitor to say, hey, I'm noticing something's going on over there. Do you think that you could help? Or do you think you could come with me and check it out? So delegating to someone else who might have a better skill set, as well as what I'm looking for. Providing a distraction. So sometimes for a lot of people, it's like, I'm not exactly sure who has the other skill set. I'm not comfortable directly intervening, but I do know that this situation needs to kind of dissolve itself. And so bringing in some level of distraction to kind of try to separate that out. And we talk with a lot of our students here about, you don't have to just pick one for a situation. You don't have to pick the same one for every situation. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. So depending on what it is that you're seeing, the kind of your surrounding area and who else is with you may help you determine what steps you're going to take. And sometimes it's being direct right then and there, and then delegating to support later, or vice versa. And so utilizing your own individual strengths in order to care about the other people in our Gamecock community.
Can I add something about the distraction?
Yeah.
I had a student in my class once who told this amazing story. She was a bartender. And when she saw something she didn't like, she would accidentally spill drinks on the people involved, and they would interrupt it. The person, usually the woman that was being targeted by some man, and she didn't like the way the man was, targeting her, would like, oh, I know I have to go to the restroom and dry off, and her friends would go with her or whatever, and it would just sort of interrupt the situation. you know, and like create some kind of wedge, you know,
Mhm.
between what it looked like to her was going to happen if she just kind of let the situation continue. And I thought that was just fascinating.
That's a great example of distraction and of using the power you have in the situation in a positive way, right? So other people in this scenario, now somebody's going to get beat up because I spilled a drink on, on this guy. So the bartender has a little bit more freedom to do that, where it might start a fight. If so your safety is a big piece of that. I love that. We
Yeah.
routinely, obviously in our office, we talk a lot about this when it comes to alcohol. And the same thing I've always said to students is that people who are intoxicated are very easy to distract. And so it can be the greatest song that just came on the radio. It can be this shiny thing down the street, or let's go to get some food from cookout. Like there are lots of ways to distract people who are intoxicated, and that feels more safe than a direct intervention sometimes. Great. We are almost out of time. I'm checking my questions. Thoughts about, so I was really intrigued by your slide, Dr. Swan, about which substances are used, because they're not the ones that kind of typically come up in this conversation. So thoughts about, tests, coasters, fingernail polish that helps you know if your drink is safe or not. So let's close with that question. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I'll just add, I'm not really a fan of those. I don't think there's a product that can test for all those things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're kind of expensive, and I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense to every weekend, you know, have a product like that. I don't know how much they are, $25 or something. Like, to me, that's why I'm so focused on, like, let's focus on the people doing the drugging. Let's focus on the prevention messages. We might not be able to get all of them to respond. There are these antisocial people out there, but maybe, some of them. And maybe another aspect of the prevention message could be, look, you might not mean any harm by putting this Xanax in the jungle juice, but you don't know what could happen to someone from someone else.
Right. You're setting someone up to be
Yeah.
Victimized by someone else in the room.
Yeah.
All right. Any final questions or thoughts to share? Dr. Swan, any future directions? What's the next research project?
I'm happy to share the slides, by the way. I can send them to you, Amy, after the presentation. I would love to try to do a study where I could like develop some prevention messages and try them out and see how people responded. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. Right. Well, maybe that's, and we've got to write a grant, right? Get some funding
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate the participation and the folks in the room. And Ashley and Brian, thank you for participating and sharing the resources. Jenna did drop quite a lot of those links in the chat. If you didn't see them, so you can connect with some of our campus and community resources around that. And thank you again, Dr. Swan, for the work you're doing and for your insights into this experience. So thank you to everyone. And we will see you all the first Thursday in November. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.